Isn't this an admission by the Suns? They got the 2018 draft wrong. Like, I know we all know Luka's better, but if you use your number 1 overall pick, he's not a bust, obviously, he's pretty good. If you use your number 1 overall pick on an asset, as you call him, that you are reluctant to extend a rookie max offer to, you blew it, didn't you?
Well, I think they already knew they blew it in that regard. But what I would tell you, Max, is Ayton is still a really good player.
Yeah,
the issue and the comparison to me is like overpaying for a running back in the NFL. When you tie all that money up, given all the other guys that are out there on the market, you really mess yourself up cap-wise to other moves that you could make. So I see where you're going, but I just don't know if it's that big of a mess up because he's still pretty good.
Wait a minute. Did you just come up? Did we just arrive at something? Or am I just behind the times here? Are you saying that, and have others said that center is the running back? Because that's exactly right. If you draft a big who's not a great outside shooter way up high, it's like drafting a running back.
There you go. We're there.
Boy, we did something good there. Nick, you and I, we did something good. You did most of it, but I'll take the credit. What does all this mean for a potential KD trade to the Suns? That's what we really want to know here.
It hamstrings what Phoenix can do, Max. And there was so much hope initially in those first couple weeks coming from Phoenix. Okay, we'll find a way to make it work. But what you have to remember here is nobody ever really thought that Brooklyn was that interested in Ayton. It was always, well, Ayton would be part of a 3 or 4 team deal going somewhere else. Now, as you said about January 15th, that's the first time he could be moved. So Phoenix, for the time being, still has a chance to get Kevin, but I don't see it happening with Bridges, Cam Johnson, and a boatload of picks. There's got to be something more. And if you're Kevin Durant, Max, he keeps up with everything in the league. You're also looking at Phoenix and saying, okay, if they have to give up all those other pieces, even with Ayton back, is that team good enough? It just seems like that marriage that everybody thought was going to happen right away after we heard about Kevin's request, that's not happening right now.
So Jerry West, who's not only the NBA logo, but if you combine a player's level of his career, which is one of the all-time greats, top 15 or 20 easily, Jerry West, whoever lived, with their level as an executive, where he's arguably the best who ever did it, there's no one even in this guy's category in any sport. Listen to what Jerry West had to say about Kevin Durant.
For him to want out, I can see why. Wherever he goes, or to my best guess, he will be, and he's not going to get traded. You can't give enough to get a guy like him. He's one of the greatest players to ever play the game, period.
History of the NBA, Nick Friedell, is that the team that gets the best player in the deal wins the deal. And that may be changing a little bit, but as I brought this up yesterday on the show, when the late, great Dr. Jerry Buss, greatest owner in the history of American team sports by so much it's embarrassing, when he had Kobe and Kobe wanted to go to the Clippers in a trade, Jerry Buss told him, Kobe, you're a 5-carat diamond. I'm not trading you for 5 1-carat diamonds. So is Jerry West right in this case, kind of echoing that Jerry Buss sentiment? What would be the appropriate amount in a trade for KD, Nick?
There isn't one, Max. So, yeah, Jerry West is exactly right, because you cannot get back enough for Kevin Durant, who is still in his prime, who's got 4 years left on that deal, and who is still playing at an incredibly high level. That's the problem that Brooklyn is facing. The hope initially was all these teams would be falling all over each other to get the package that landed Kevin Durant. And they're looking around and they're going, I don't like any of this stuff that we've seen so far. So I can't tell you how many people out in Vegas in the last few days said, you better buckle up, because this thing is not going to be over anytime soon. It could extend into the season. And Max, this is what you need to keep in mind. 1, does Kevin actually want to come back if a deal doesn't present itself? 2, would he come back without Kyrie? And those are the questions now that the Nets are going to start to ponder even more, because what they've seen on the marketplace in the moment is that they're not getting nearly enough to move one of the generational talents in the game.
Well, here's the good news for the Nets. You can't say this about every team. There's a lot of ifs. If Ben Simmons comes back and actually plays basketball and he's most of the same player. or at least some of it. If Joe Harris is healthy, who's a perimeter defender and a lights-out shooter, even if not in the playoffs. Seth Curry is a lights-out shooter. KD is one of the greatest players ever. Kyrie. It's in there. A championship-level roster is there, whether or not it all fits, and if all these things happen, if they all come back together. Jeff Van Gundy was talking about this on KJM this morning on ESPN Radio. If they all come back together, it's not impossible they can win a championship. What do you think their ceiling is?
I don't think they can win a title, Max, just because I think the culture that Sean Marks talked about a few weeks ago at his end of the season press conference is messed up beyond repair. And so to me, having been around that team and watched it all unfold over the last few months, I think in Brooklyn's dream scenario, they find a way to bring Kevin back and say, hey, we will still continue to work and find you the right trade destination if we can, but we want you to come back and we want you to be part of this group. I just don't see how they can bring Kyrie back. And that's really the question to me is if Kevin will come back without Kyrie, because that was what became such a problem, especially later in the year after the vaccination stuff and everything else. They just couldn't count on Kyrie to be out there day to day. Kevin stood behind him publicly at every turn, but he also saw what was going on, and you wonder how much of an impact that would have moving forward into next season.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.